So thanks everybody for coming. This is the last YW Talks of the season. They started in September and we've had a presenter every month, and we're very glad to have Suzette here today. So Suzette Dussault, like Jeannette Rankin, is a native Missoulian, a teacher, librarian, and small business owner. She is mostly a political activist, learning the tools for her trade from her father, Edward T. Dussault, former state senator and district judge. Believing that we are a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, she relishes the tale of how many of the people of Montana rose up, threw off the copper collar of the company, and passed a referendum granting Montana women the right to vote in Montana elections. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Miranda, for those kind remarks. And thank you all for being here today. We have much work ahead of us, much work to be done for the good of our country and for the good of women everywhere. For you see, today something very important needs to be done. In November of this year, November 1914, the good men of our good state will be asked to vote whether their wives, their mothers, their daughters will be allowed to vote in our state elections. They will be asked to approve an amendment to our state constitution granting Montana women the right to vote in Montana elections. Today I stand before you as a native daughter of Montana, born in this beautiful Missoula Valley on our family ranch not far from here. Today I stand before you, the daughter of Montana pioneers, Olive Pickering Rankin and John Rankin, where working alongside my mother, I learned the practical skills of sewing, cooking, cleaning, and caring for my younger brother and sisters. Where working alongside my father, I learned how to run a farm, operate a sawmill, and to oversee construction, sometimes even building a sidewalk myself on some of our Missoula's finest buildings, from my father, who built the first bridge across the Clark Fork River. From them, I learned that when something needed to be done, you simply did it. Together, they taught me that it takes a man and a woman working side by side to create a community. They taught me the value of men and women working together, and that both men and women should be treated equally, should be treated the same. On the 4th of July each year, we celebrate the founding of our great nation. Each year on that date, we renew our commitment to those basic principles of our great democracy. One is embodied in the Declaration of Independence, which proclaims that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Well, today we honor and reaffirm that commitment, but we declare that all men and all women are created equal. Further, it was declared by one of our finest presidents, Abraham Lincoln, the idea that our government be of the people, by the people, and for the people. We continue to honor and affirm that declaration, but I ask you, are we women not the people? So across this great state, across this great nation, is work to be done. And I believe that the women of this great nation are capable, able, and willing to do this great work. But we need to have a voice in our government. We need to have a say in our democracy and in the laws that protect and help all of us, the men, the women, and the children of this land. We need to have the right to vote. Today I stand before you, following in the footsteps of the good men and women who have walked before us, following in the footsteps of local suffragists Ida Auerbach, Dr. Maria Dean, my good friend Frida Fliegelman and her sister Bella Fliegelman Weinstein, who have kept the suffrage movement alive, who have worked tirelessly for years to keep the hope alive, to keep the candle of suffrage burning. So I stand before you today, along with countless other women and men across this great state of ours, to ask that you join us in this work that needs to be done. This work is simply to give we women the right to vote. We must join our neighbors, the states of Utah, Wyoming, Nevada, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California, Idaho, and the territory of Alaska, who have already recognized the right of the women in their states to have their voices heard, to have their opinions matter, to have the vote. And so we ask, why not Montana? For you see, a woman's constitutional right to vote in Montana is not a new idea. It is an idea that has been brought before many times before the good state of Montana in the state legislature. The state legislature, as you know, must approve this referendum to go before the voters. It must be approved by a 2/3 majority of our state legislature. We have not been able to achieve that number. We have introduced this proposal to the 1895, 1897, 1899, 1901, 1903, 1905, 1907, 1909, 1911, and 1913 state legislatures. The women of Wyoming have had the vote since 1893. And we say, why not Montana? Well, the good men of the state of Montana, working with the good women of the state of Montana, finally elected a state legislature and a governor, a lieutenant governor, who had the courage to stand up and say, yes, we will put this issue finally, after trying for 20 years, to put it on the ballot in 1914. So the 1913 legislature, elected by a grassroots movement that swelled up in this good state of Montana, who recognized the injustice that was done, that did not allow the women of our state the right to vote, elected a governor, a lieutenant governor, and a legislature that would finally put this before the good voters of Montana. Courageously, the 1913 Montana legislature saw fit to put this important issue on the ballot, to give the men of this state, who you know are the voters in this state, a say in whether their wives, their mothers, their daughters will have the right to vote. For you see, this is not an issue to be decided in the halls of the legislature, but this is an issue to be decided in the homes, on the farms, in the businesses of we the people, where the very homes, the very farms, the very businesses where men and women have worked together side by side to build this great state of ours. Now, we women have never said that we were better than men. Oh no, we have always said that men and women are like the right and the left hands. It just makes sense not to use both. We also say that it is beautiful, right, and good that a mother should nurse her child through typhoid fever. But it is also beautiful and right and good that she should have a say in the regulation of the milk supply from which that typhoid fever comes. It is beautiful and right and good that a wife should care for her family, should feed and clothe and provide for them. But it is also beautiful and right and good that a woman should have a say in whether her husband works in a safe mine, or whether her husband has the right to strike for better wages, wages that are just compensation for a good day's work, without being set upon by thugs that we know the company hires to harass and berate the workers when they try to speak up for fair wages and safer working conditions. So in this election, in the election of November 1914, in just a few short months, we will use both hands. In this election, in the year 1914, the good men of this state will have the opportunity to vote on this important issue for the first time since our statehood. And this time, the good men and women of the state of Montana, desiring full equality, full citizenship, full participation, fair taxation with representation, full emancipation of their good women will prevail. We will work together to convince the voters of this good state of Montana to grant our women the right to vote. Well, we know the powerful interests at work, hard at work, to deny our right to vote. Oh yes, they are powerful. The mining companies do not want women to have a say in the workings of their unsafe mine. The smelter owners do not want women to have a say in the long hours demanded of their husbands. Oh yes, the liquor interests which prey upon the downtrodden and the working poor do not want a woman's voice in the regulation of their profits. Now, we do not have the money that we know has bought elections in the past, that has bought judges, governors, United States senators, the state legislatures, but we have the people. We may not have the money, we may have merely $4,000 in our campaign chest, but we have the people. Now, it may be my mighty lemon meringue pie that will buy this election, but I suspect that we do not need to buy this election at all. We will win the right for women to vote by a simple call for equality, fairness, and justice, the right to do right. Now, we know the powerful interests at work against us. We do not have the newspaper in Montana, and I am speaking of one newspaper because one powerful voice, the Anaconda Mining Company, the mighty Anaconda Mining Company, owns the voice of the newspapers in this state. We may not have the voice of the newspapers, but we have the ears of the good people of Montana. Oh yes, we have the powerful and the mighty who do not want us to have the vote, to have a voice in our government, in our laws, and in our regulations. But we have the good people of Montana who know that is right and just and fair. And so we will take our cause to the people. We will have rallies. We will speak it from street corners. We will speak on every farm, in every mine, in every smelter, in every lumber camp in this good state. Across this great state, I ask you to join your friends, your neighbors, in every little precinct in this good state of ours, that you will swear to bring in the vote for women. It will take each and every one of us to make this happen. We will work together. We will rally on street corners. We'll be at county fairs, at Grange Hall meetings, at Union Hall meetings. We will be at women's club meetings. We have good government clubs in every county in this state. And I ask that you join us. We will raise money with bazaars and socials and bake sales. We will be at parades, at powwows, at rodeos. We will be there speaking up for a woman's right to vote. We will fan out across this great state of ours, in our homes, in our smelters, in our mines, in our businesses. We may not have the press in Montana, but we have the ears of Montana. Now, we have established the Montana Equal Franchise Society. We set up headquarters in Butte in the Thornton Hotel just in February of this year. And from this wonderful organization, we will be joined by countless others. The Helena Men's Suffrage Society will join us. The Farmers Union will join us in this. The labor unions in Butte, who know that a woman's voice is important in regulating the unsafe conditions of the mines. Where politicians gather to solicit votes, we will be there. If they are on the ballot, the governor, the lieutenant governor, our secretary of state, when they are speaking up at a rally, we will speak up as well. And we will ask them, sir, what do you think of a woman's right to vote? And of course, he will say, as all politicians will, that whatever the people want them to hear. And so, of course, he will say to the question, "Sir, do you want your wife to have the vote?" He will, of course, say, "Why, of course I want my wife to vote." And so this becomes a very popular campaign issue. And from this, we will garner that commitment that when it comes time for them to speak up on women's suffrage, they will speak up. As president of the Montana Equal Suffrage Central Committee, I am joined by countless other men and women across Montana, for this is truly a grassroots movement where county by county, precinct by precinct, good men and women in each town will bring home the vote. Now, we in Montana, believing in fairness, in justice, we will have a fair and civil election. We must make sure that the bosses of the mines and the smelters do not coerce their workers, as they have in the past, to vote a certain way. We know that the use of the wrestling card system has been used to eliminate those people that they do not want to work in their mines, those men who may not have voted in the way that they have wanted to in the past election. We know that party bosses have bought votes in the past. We also know that party bosses, along with the owners of the mines and the smelters, have threatened to eliminate jobs in a certain area if a certain candidate is not elected. And so we must make sure that we have a fair election. We must make sure that the campaign is civil, that it is a civil discussion between neighbors, a plea for fairness and justice, not a place where women and men will be berated or beaten because of their desire for justice. We saw a terrible injustice in Washington, D.C. last year, when thousands of men and women gathered on the lawn of our nation's capital to march in a peaceful parade in this show of support for women's suffrage, not just for a woman's right to vote in her home state, but for a woman's right to vote in all of our elections. Thousands of men and women, all supporters of national women's suffrage, we gathered peacefully to march the streets of our capital amid the joy of parade, with marching bands, supporters on horses, banners and flags proclaiming that the right to vote was an inalienable right granted by our Constitution, granted to all citizens of this great country. It was a grand display of support for women's suffrage. 5,000 marchers from every state in the Union gathered on Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House to march, and 500,000 spectators were there to cheer us on. But there were those who wanted to disrupt this peaceful parade. We were insulted, spat upon, assaulted, knocked down. A terrible fight broke out where women and men were seriously injured. So I ask you to join us in Helena in September of this year at the magnificent parade at our state fair. It will be a peaceful parade in Montana, where we will gather and proudly bring the men and women of this grand state together to show that Montana women are just as good as the women of Wyoming or Utah or Idaho, that our women are just as smart and capable of having a voice in our government, that the women of Montana are just as deserving as the women of California or Washington to have a say in the laws of their great state, that we are guaranteed this basic right, that basic right inalienable, granted to all citizens of this United States. So we must stand together to demand that we have a fair election. We must man and woman every ballot box, particularly in Butte, in Anaconda, in Helena, in Great Falls, to make sure that the vote is not stolen, that every vote is counted. The good men and women of San Francisco worked hard the day of election to protect their ballot box, to make sure that they were counted properly. In Michigan, it was claimed that the liquor interest had purposefully withheld election results so they could readjust the total to defeat women's suffrage by a very suspicious narrow margin. So we will be ever vigilant and make sure that the first time our Montana men have had a chance to vote on this important issue, that it will be a just and fair election. We wonder, is there a concerted effort on the part of some in our great nation to deny suffrage, to deny the vote to certain groups of Americans? Why would they steal votes? Why would they disrupt parades? Is there a concerted effort to silence the voices of the poor, the immigrants, the blacks, the women, to deny them to have a voice in their government, to have a right to vote? 140 years after the founding of our country, it is time that we, the people, have a say in our government. And it is only when we, the people, demand it. So I stand before you today, a daughter of this beautiful state of Montana who cannot vote, who has no say in the workings of our good state, a daughter who, working alongside her mother and her father, saw that when something needed to be done, we simply did it. Today, we stand together to demand that women have that basic right, guaranteed by our U.S. Constitution, the right to vote. We stand together, coming from all walks of life, every political party, every faith. We stand united on one point, and that is a woman's right to vote. So I ask that you stand with us against the tyranny of oppression in all forms, to stand against those who would say that women are inferior to men. We say no. To stand to those who would allow saloons to flourish where schools perish. We say no. To stand together against those who would exploit their workers for a profit. We say no. To stand up to the company who we know controls the votes of their workers. We say no. To stand up to party bosses who we know buys the votes of many of our good citizens. We say no. To stand up to the company who does not want safe working conditions in our mines, our smelters, in our lumber camps, who refuse the right of workers to rally, to protest for safer working conditions. We say no. So we must join our neighbors, the states of Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Nevada, Oregon, California, Washington, Idaho, and the territory of Alaska, in recognizing the right of we, the women, to be heard. And so we ask, why not Montana? So I stand before you today, and I ask that you stand with us, that you join the many good government clubs across this state, that you join the Good Government Club in Missoula, that you join the Good Government Club in Ravalli County, in Lewis and Clark County, in whatever county that you are from, and that you bring in the vote for women. So we ask, why not Montana? And so I ask Montana, why not Montana? So thank you, and I look forward to working with you on this great work that needs to be done. Thank you. So, thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Yeah, that was great.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Suzette?
So sorry, go ahead. Was that a speech that Jeannette Rankin gave at?
Actually, no. This is just a speech from certain quotes that she had, and then just from some of the political literature, like let me think. An example of one quote I have is the idea of the mother with typhoid fever. That is her direct quote. Some of them would be, I just think that she would have just appealed to fairness and justice. I mean, that was kind of their big plea. Just the idea that also to state pride, like why would Montana not have women's suffrage when the rest 10 states already in the western part of the United States had women's suffrage? So she appealed to that state pride as well. But the point being is that they were never allowed to vote on it until 1913, or when they elected the 1913 legislature, which would put it on the ballot. So, and also she spoke very extemporaneously. So she would give a speech, she would write out a speech, she would give it to the press, and the press would have to almost just throw it away because she would vary so much from her speech, that so much of what she said was so much from her heart, and she was so passionate about this issue particularly, because she was very she went to to Boston to see her brother Wellington, who was a student at Harvard, and she and her cousin found themselves in a part of Boston that was where young ladies were not to be found, and was shocked at the living conditions of the immigrants who had come to the States. So this was the galvanizing event in her life, that she saw that this was injustice that she had never seen before, because in Montana we would have the poor, and certainly we had our issues, but this was poverty which she'd never seen before. So she, this was really her, the point in her life where she saw that work needed to be done, and she was going to do it, and that it would take women championing social issues, championing the cause of families, of women and children and men, because if a man is killed on the job, the wife does not have any recourse. So she was very passionate about that, and so I kind of wrote her speech. This speech is, I think she would have, the points that she would have made. One thing about this speech is that she did not go up against prohibition. I went probably a little heavier in prohibition than she would have, because Montana was a wet state. Pretty much men liked their liquor, and she did not align with the prohibitionists to really, to campaign on, because she knew that she would come up against opposition immediately. So she underplayed it. And also she did not go out directly against the company. I brought it in more for historical purposes, to teach people about really what was going on in the state. But she really kept hands off, and they kind of kept hands off her too. They didn't realize that this was going to be a powerful force, that actually the vote would be granted in that election. So the speech is just a little bit different. So yeah, I wish I could just have a speech that she wrote, but yeah, I haven't found one.
It's creative. It's very creative that you come up with your own and use just your knowledge of her and the movement to come up with something that you thought that she may have done.
Oh,
Maybe it wasn't
thank
even,
you.
Documented. But
Yeah, thank you. There is an interview that was taped by John Board in 1973, I believe. May have been just because she died in 73, actually, or 72. No, she died in, oh my gosh, she was born in 1880. Yeah, she died in 72, 73, so it was just before her death. But she's very vibrant on that tape, and it's really fun to listen to her speak, because she talks very plainly. She does not speak in highfalutin terms. She's very direct, and so that helped also to be able to hear her actual voice. So if you ever get an opportunity to listen to those tapes, they're available at the Mansfield Library. And it's powerful to hear her voice. It's great that we have those. So, yeah.
Suzette, I'm struck with the references you made to the corporations and the money and the power that they had over the voters. And here it is 100 years later, essentially.
Exactly.
And what we have changed through her and so many others in Montana is we've won the right for women to vote. What hasn't changed, and what seems to have come to an enormous head, is the corporate rule of American elections. And I'm wondering if you would have a few words that you might say about that and what we could do.
Yes. Actually, that's why I love giving this speech, is because, one, it shows that a powerful grassroots movement was able to make a difference. And just as we needed a powerful grassroots movement in 1914, we need a powerful grassroots movement today. And it can happen because literally the company did not, the company literally controlled the lives of many of these men. They controlled the lives of the lumberjacks who lived in the camps in Milltown, in Bonner, in western Montana, in the northern Highline, up in Thompson Falls. They controlled those people because the railroads and the mines bought most of the lumber. So if the lumberjacks did not vote a certain way, then they would lose their jobs. And in 1903, there was a total shutdown. 15,000 men, which was a lot of workers in those days, lost their jobs because there was a dispute over a judge who was doing the right thing in Butte, and they wanted him off the bench. And so they totally shut down the state. 15,000 men lost their job for, I think, 2 to 3 weeks before. I believe it was Governor Toole, who did not want to call a special session, but he called a special session of the legislature to enact certain, I forget what the legislation was, that removed this man from office. I can't remember exactly what happened, but that's how the party controlled the state, and or not the party, but the company. So I love the idea that we're sitting in a position today where we have just as powerful interests at work, making sure that we do not have laws where workers can strike. In some places, certainly our unions have seen a collapse. We do not have the ability for workers to be fairly compensated for a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. There are certain attempts to eliminate unions and the power of the unions. Certainly we see women having 70% on the dollar of what every man earns. So we're seeing many of the same things. We're seeing where the coal trains are coming through and without, real safety standards enacted. Where our water is being compromised because of big business, because of the idea of jobs. So we're seeing again the same thing with the exploitation of our natural resources that was done in the copper mines in Butte that really benefited a handful of people. And mostly they were a handful of people that sat on a board in New York City. Once Marcus Daly died, control went to New York, where it was a board of stockholders that owned. It was no longer a Montana company. And so today, again, we're seeing those powerful influences that are not concerned about what some of this stuff is doing to our air, to our water, to our land. And so I think it's, again, really a story for us today that we need to work together to stand up.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
I'm just thinking, listening to you, that, 100 years ago, my grandfather was a miner in Butte. He was one of the miners in the copper mine. You think of, how did he vote? I'm never going to know that. But I've always heard that, decisions that reverberated to the whole state and the government, the trouble was not Helena, but the 6th floor of the Hennessy building in uptown Butte, because that's where the Anticon offices were.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
Yeah, I mentioned the wrestling card system. Well, when Marcus Daly died, it was really a shift, because Marcus Daly, there may be good and bad things about Marcus, but at least he was a miner, and he did respect. Yeah, he respected his miners. So that's your understanding too. Yeah, when he died, the Standard Oil Company bought out the mines, and so now no longer was this a Montana company, and they consolidated all the mines, so that if a miner wanted to work on the hill, he would have a wrestling card, and if he was shown to be organizing in any way, he would be given a black mark. So not only would he lose his job at a certain mine, but he wouldn't be hired on any of the mines in Butte. So, it's a really powerful, and so that's why I love to tell this story, is because it was really a people's movement. So.
Do you have any ideas specifically about what or how to organize, particularly women, but maybe all of us, to correct some of today's mega corporation excesses, if you will? The buying and selling of elections, the garbage that comes across into TV repetitively that has nothing to do with issues, but more with character assassination.
Oh, I just saw
the election of politicians that are not really equipped to govern, but they certainly are capable of being led around by the nose by the people who fund them. The fact that many of our legislators are in little 10 by 10 cubicles fundraising amongst these moneyed interests instead of governing the people. So when you see like a C-SPAN view of the chambers in Congress, there might be one person speaking and 3 in the audience, and the rest of them are fundraising.
Yeah.
They're not doing the work of the people. How can we bring that back around to the point where, we're really getting our money's worth out of our...
I think to probably impact on the national level is more difficult. I think that we need to make sure that we let Tester and Dane and Walsh and Danes know exactly how we feel. I think we need to speak up. And there are certainly things on the national level. There are two other thoughts that came to mind. First of all, is I think that we have more impact on the local level. We have made great strides in Montana over the years, and our water quality. We prevented a mine from coming in up at Lincoln, a gold mine up the headwaters of the Blackfoot. We worked to save our open space. We've worked for sustainable agriculture by promotion of our farmers markets. But it's all been because people have worked. It hasn't been because we've just sort of let it sort of happen. I mean, it has been work on the ground from many of us. Francis, I know you worked a lot in the peace movement, so it is going to take each one of us speaking up. But what they did also is they organized on the local level, and they literally, it was a difficult time because we're talking 1914. They maybe had the phone, they had the telegraph, they had the car, but it really was a grassroots movement where Jeannette and others went around the state and they organized in each county, and they created what are called good government clubs. So it was really a people-to-people movement. And I think that has to happen again. I think part of the problem is that we're so diverse. Like, you're working on your issue. There are other people working on sustainable agriculture. There are other women working on women's issues, on children's issues. Well, we need, and we don't always agree. You can see the split, how they've effectively split the unions from the environmentalists. And we need to come back to say, okay, we don't always agree on everything, but we have to work together. And so I just think, again, it's people to people and organizing around candidates. So on both local, because our state legislature has been just doing horrible things. I mean, look at the stand your ground law that they allowed pass in Montana. I mean, that was our state legislature, so we've got to elect legislators that are going to finally say, no, this is, no. So I guess that was one thing, is that it's going to take each one of us. And then also, I think more effective things can be done on the local level, but we cannot lose sight of things on the national level, like talking to Walsh and hopefully, and Chester. Because, I mean, already I'm against the XL pipeline, and Chester's in support of it. So I'm sorry to put this on camera, but you know, an MCAT, but it's true. We need to make sure that he understands our feelings on that. I don't know if you agree with Exxon pipeline or if that's your issue, but anyway, so I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it definitely, I think Missoula is a great community to start that type of change. I mean, we have, I think, the passion and the resources, and it's a good size of a community, and we have the university, and so there's a lot of people with all these ideas and feelings, but just like, like you said, speaking up and bringing, you know, having every individual feel like they have a voice, I think, can actually make a huge difference. Even just, you know, like I've been able to see, like for Huffington Post Live, for instance, where they're having people come on who are just everyday people and talking about their experience in the movement, whether it's, you know, whatever topic. And some are, you know, a little bit higher up in credibility, and some people are just passionate about the issue, but just, I think it's been really powerful having that type of source of media where you're really getting people's feelings and about, you know, issues, even kids sometimes that are on there and talking about, you know, how it's impacting the youth and stuff. So I mean, I think, just like you were saying, starting kind of local and then, you know, trying to support those people locally, and
Do you see a change in your generation using social media? Do you think they're less likely to buy into that big corporate? I mean, I just spoke in Helena, and I was astonished at the billboards there. I mean, they're so negative. It's the negative thing just coming right into Helena off of, you know, out of the road from Missoula. It's really, it's not so prevalent here as there, but I mean, do you think that there are people who will say, you know, it was just mudslinging ad. There was nothing to it except just mudslinging. Tester voted for with Obama 95% of the time. It was literally what the ad said. And there's nothing informational about it except unless you really are, you know, opposed to Obama's policies, but anyway, so what are you guys thinking? Do you think?
You know, I think there's definitely a split. There are quite a few people that are very media literate and know that not everything we see or hear is the truth, and those of us that can read from different sources and watch from different sources and you know, glean what we feel to be the truths and the messages out of what we're hearing. But there also are still a lot of people in our generation that are that are just fine to believe everything that's coming at them and to kind of just keep going along with whatever the herd kind of mentality seems to be at the time. Whatever messages are coming at them, kind of going with that. And I think it's very, very split.
Yeah, I think you have to have, in order to really, get the right information, you have those skills of critical thinking these days a little bit more than you would probably before, just having so many different media sources telling you one thing and the other, and blogs and all this stuff on the internet that's just feeding into it, and it's really easy to get misinformation and not know that it is misinformation. And but yeah, I mean, I think things like the billboards are just to really get people's emotions and not so much anything else. It's an easy way to just get somebody to say, oh, Obama, I don't like him. Okay, now this way or that way. It's easy for people. They don't want to have to think about it. So yeah. Anything else before we wrap up?
Well, just as a footnote, the women's suffrage movement referendum did pass. It was the first state ever to pass it in the first go. A lot of states they were gearing up for a 3 or 4 year battle, but it went in the first go around. And it was interesting to see those counties that supported women's suffrage. Missoula, of course. I don't believe Helena did. Silver Bow, which is Butte, was by a narrow margin. But what had happened, because there was some union, some threatening of strike or some union activity there, they called martial law in June. So there was effectively no ability to campaign. So there was a very interesting strategy. Who knows if that was political or not. But Butte was a toss-up by about 34 votes. I believe Ravalli County came in because there was one woman who was elected to the state legislature the next election in 1916 who brought that county forward. But it was a lot of the lumber camps where we think of now are very conservative places. They voted for women's suffrage in northwest Montana, and it was the eastern part of the state where we had new settlers. What do you call those? Homesteaders. And they actually brought a lot of progressive movement to the state. So it was really an interesting, there again, coalition between prohibitionists and the lumber people, the miners, and the farmers. So it was a really interesting makeup of people that caused, so it was a bringing together of disparate interests around one single issue. And so I think that maybe we can do that again. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. And like I said, this is the last one of the season, so hopefully we'll see you all starting again in September.